Hello, welcome to the Housing Sector Podcast. Today I have Lisa Malyon, who has started up, and I think this is a great name, Mums Versus Mould. Lisa, how and why did this start?
So it was my own personal experience, actually. So I lived in a house that we owned with my first daughter. I've got three children. And so my mum's a nurse, my dad's a builder, and I'm university educated. So you'd think that I would understand air and ventilation and mold and the risks of mold, and I just didn't. So we were living in a house with no heating upstairs. And as a result of having no heating upstairs, which was the design of the house, they expected the heat from the middle floor to rise. We had a condensation problem. So we're there power showering every day, thinking everything's great and not shutting the door, not realizing the importance of that or really the ventilation. Our windows were very large and didn't have locks on them. So for the children, with young children, we didn't really open them. And the problem just kept getting worse and worse. And some of our windows would go right down to the carpet level. So we had a black line of mold across the carpet. And actually, I thought mold is penicillin. It's good for you. We use mold in medicine. And I really didn't understand the risks associated with mold. So it was then me and my daughter, we both became very, very sick. We had chest infection after chest infection, which eventually became resistant to antibiotics. And then I collapsed with chest pain. And was rushed to hospital, and then I was admitted to hospital with pneumonia. So community acquired pneumonia, and essentially what it was a fungal infection in my lungs. So there was a big mass in my lungs, which initially they thought could be cancer. But when they looked a bit closer, it was a fungal infection. I was treated with Tamiflu and antifungals and other steroids to get me back on my feet. But without modern medicine, I don't think I'd be here to start up Mums Versus Mould today. And I thought to myself, after all of that had happened, and we realised that actually it was our environment, because my mum kept saying, Lisa, I really think you've got to be cleaning down that mould every day, getting rid of it as soon as it arrives, dealing with it. And then I was buying mould sprays from the shop, and it was getting worse and worse. And then when I read into it a bit more, I realized that I was doing all the wrong things, that actually mold really feeds on bleach, which is in most of these mold sprays. And I just thought, I've got to cut through all of this and help other mums. So I did. And luckily, my health is I'm completely recovered and returned to full health. But unfortunately, my daughter, because she had very young developing lungs, she will now have asthma for the rest of her life, which is horrible to watch because her little voice changes, when she's struggling, which is when she's not had a steroid. So she has a preventative steroid inhaler, and then she has a blue inhaler for those times when she's got a wheeze. And if for whatever reason she misses her preventative steroid inhaler, her little voice goes, and you can hear her really struggling. And I just think back to that bedroom where all of that mold was every time. So I'm now on a mission to help every single parent in this country understand the risks of mold, how to prevent it, but if you have it, how to remediate it safely.
Now, I'm very interested in the spray and the bleach, because that was something I didn't know, and I think that's what I saw on your LinkedIn post, which caused us to engage. And I didn't know that. But let's take it back a few steps. So, what was the sort of first signs that you started to think, hang on a minute, that there could be damp and mold here? And how long was that before your hospitalisation? And I suppose the question I'm framing here is what could have been done had you acted quicker? What should parents be on the lookout for?
Should have been done. As soon as I moved into the house and smelt that musty smell in some fitted wardrobes, that was my body's senses telling me there's something not right. If you smell something that doesn't smell right, It's because
Mm.
it's not right for you and your health. So what I should have done is, as soon as I'd smelt that, done some air testing so that I could have understood what's happening in the air around us, because the air is, and that's why I created indoor air aware. The air is just as important as what you're putting in your body in terms of eating and exercise. The air around us is so important. So that's what I should have done. What also could have happened, which would have really helped, is if the GP had said or asked, what's your living conditions like? Is there any mold? Is there water damage? Tell me a little bit about where you're sleeping. But instead, what GPs were saying to me is, oh, well, you've got a very dry cough. Therefore, what I would recommend is for you and your daughter is get not a dehumidifier, but a humidifier. So they were saying put more moisture into our air. So they didn't realize that we'd already bogged down with all this moisture. So yeah, I think that there's so many steps along the way that this could have been avoided. So the senses, so me actually seeing mold. So if you see black mold, that's not okay. That's a problem, and that is immediate. It's having an immediate impact. And that's the other really, really important part about all of this. And this is the biggest part that I've learned, is that if you imagine there's an ice cap, this is the iceberg, and the tip of the iceberg up here is the allergic response to mold. So that's the dry eyes, itchy eyes, hives, so kind of itching, and asthma, and then fungal infections, which is what ends up in pneumonia, aspergillosis. But actually, the big problem is the inflammatory response. And that's not even recognised by the NHS. So this is happening. So lots of people are being misdiagnosed with fibromyalgia, functional neurological disorder, and that was just a made up term, basically, because people have got these symptoms and nobody knows why. Because actually, if you do all their blood pressure and test their bloods and everything, they look fine. But then they've got all of these chronic fatigue and brain fog. And actually, that's all happening because of what's happening in the air, which is being presented to us by water damaged buildings. So it's an absolute quagmire of mess, because the NHS don't know about it. The GPs aren't given environmental health training. They don't understand about secondary metabolites that a water damaged building is giving off. There's not enough research in this country. And we are, because my background is energy and behavior change and energy efficiency, we are not heating our homes because of the energy crisis, which means that water damage is now becoming an epidemic.
So you often hear that, heat your homes and keep your windows open, and people just can't afford to do that. I mean, my dad years ago would have gone absolutely ballistic if you had your heating on and then opened up your windows.
Yeah, and that's first of all, that's what everybody thinks. But it's really interesting. The way that relative humidity works in a house is very counterintuitive. So it's not what you'd expect. So in a house, it obviously costs more to heat wet air than it does to heat dry air. So by having a window open around 5 centimeters, you lose less than 5% heat. But by having that window open, you're losing humidity, and therefore it's cheaper to heat the home. So actually, your dad, depending on how wide the window is open for how long, he was actually wrong, because actually by reducing humidity, you're using less heat energy. And I do recommend that. So obviously, where people are drying clothes indoors, always have a window open. But the one thing that I do recommend every morning, and again in the afternoon or evening, when you're using most of your hot water, so baths, cooking, etc., power showers are the biggest problem. But when you are doing those things, give your home a daily detox, which is basically cross ventilation. So if you imagine that you're allowing the air to sweep through your home, so you open every single window and door as wide as they'll go, and then every single internal door. because what that does is it basically cleans out. So you get rid of all your pollutants that are in your home. You have microplastics, your volatile organic compounds, which are the chemicals that are released from woods and plastics, all the stuff you can't see, but they're doing your body harm. And then also gases, so things like when you if let's say if you're using gas for cooking your food, that's releasing and other gases, and it's all of these things are just basically adding to the health impact. So by doing that, you're going to release all of those pollutants and then exchange that for much cleaner air. And that's actually something that I didn't realize before I started doing my air monitoring, is that because Sadiq Khan is here in my ear, I'm in Greater London, so he's there in my ear telling me the air outside is disgusting. So I've been keeping my windows shut, thinking that because we live on a main road, my daughter, because she's asthmatic, I'll keep all of our windows closed on the front of the house. That was a while ago. But then I started air monitoring inside and outside and realized that the air inside was disgusting and the air outside was really clean, even at rush hour. So then I started doing the daily detox and everything improved in our home. So we must just really take a focus on the fact that your indoor air is what you are living and breathing most of the time, or children are at schools, that's a whole other issue. But we must ventilate, we must get air exchange, because our homes are more airtight now than ever. And we're bringing more crap into them than ever. You know, if you walk down the supermarket, all of the chemicals that we're bringing in, the cleaning products, the air fresheners, it's never ending. All of these products being thrown at us all the whole time, and they're all bad for us.
It sounds like we all need completely re-educating on how we approach damp and mold. What is the air aware system that you've got behind you there?
Yep, so that logo that represents indoorairaware.co.uk. So that is a not-for-profit, free education and information service. And that is designed to help housing associations, councils, private landlords, and residents access information about what's in your air, how to look after your air, how to identify if you've got a problem. I do things like I go into my laundry lab and I do indoor drying experiments so that I can show people this is the cheapest way to dry your clothes indoors, but actually this is the healthiest way, or the best for the environment. So giving people all of the information so they can make the right choices. There are people out there who are giving really bad advice, and that's why I'm doing all of this. It's about cutting through the noise. There's one money saving expert out there who told everybody in a podcast, I think it was October 2021. So, in the thick of it, in terms of energy costs. And he told everybody, ditch your demon appliance, which was a tumble dryer. And a tumble dryer has a very impactful role in a small home with no outdoor drying space. So what a vented tumble dryer does is it basically zaps all of that water very quickly for a cost. But his advice to get rid of these demon appliances and not use them because of the cost, and then replace them with a dehumidifier. So you've got the cost of buying a dehumidifier. Yeah, and if you don't know what you're looking for, you can be spending money on a NAF machine. But then you're going to be plugging that dehumidifier in. And he was comparing the price of running a tumble dryer per hour to the price of running a dehumidifier per hour. But as my laundry lab experiment showed, is that you're looking at more like 8 hours of running a dehumidifier. So the costs just don't stack up. And actually, I recommend a vented tumble dryer is the best thing that a landlord could give to a tenant, because that means then that all of that moisture from the indoor drying is zapped straight away, straight out the house. And therefore, it's not going to impact the fabric or the health of the people inside. So yeah, that's why I'm kind of putting myself out there and just setting things straight in the interest of people's health.
Because we get the background of you know the housing association world and everything I'm sort of known for arguing with. But what they're often saying, look, it's lifestyle choices. But it kind of sounds to me like there might be some truth to that.
Yeah, there absolutely is. The Housing Ombudsman, they've got a really interesting report, which is it's called Landlords, Not Lifestyle, which is really interesting. It's all about mold and damp, and it's about the fact that you, landlord, you are responsible for the mold and condensation in the home that you own. And that's absolutely right. They are responsible. They have, as a, there's the health and the home health rating system, which basically says that if there's mold and damp in a home, it's of a certain size and it has to be visible, which we can come on to. But that is a category 1 hazard. And that means that those people are at risk. So you do have to make sure that if you are renting out a home, that it is free from water damage. So historical water damage can be incredibly dangerous to people's health. So free from water damage, but that it has all of the requirements in order to keep that home free from condensation problems. So it would need to have a tumble dryer. It would need to have very good ventilation in wet rooms. And then also things like a hygrometer. So you can get a hygrometer for a tenner on Amazon. So you stick a hygrometer in the dry rooms, and that would then enable the tenant to see that anything over 65% of water in your air is not good for your health. So that would then mean you're giving the tenant, as a responsible landlord, you're giving the tenant the tools they need in order to keep your property safe from water damage, but also protect their health. But so that's the bit that the landlord can do. The landlord could also do prescriptive things. So they could say, right, I'm handing over this home to you. I want you to have a healthy stay in this home, but it will only stay healthy if you do these things. Do not dry clothes on the radiators. Do not dry clothes indoors. You've been given a tumble dryer. Lots of people say to me, yeah, but I can't afford to run a tumble dryer. And when I show them actually the cost of risk to your health, it's worth finding the money and reprioritizing your budget so you can afford the tumble dryer. Other people also say to me, well, I don't like using a tumble dryer because my clothes shrink. And I say, well, buy them in the next size up. Like, let's just think about our health here rather than the aesthetics of clothes. So tumble dryer, but also then making sure the landlord making sure that the windows are that you can open them and that it's safe to do so. So I was in a lady's house that has got a really bad mold problem the other day. So the landlord had new windows fitted, which was part of the problem because the house had become more airtight. So, but the new windows that had been fitted, ground floor flat, and the windows open that way, which meant that if it opened that way with a safety catch at the top, she could leave her windows open when she goes out or at night. But because these windows had no safety catch and were opened that way, she wasn't able to open her windows. So, it was that kind of the landlord has given her the windows, which is great, but they're the wrong windows. So that's a good example. So the landlord can do loads of stuff to provide and prescript a healthy home. But then there is a part that the tenant plays. And if the tenant isn't doing those things, if they're turning off the ventilation, so mechanical ventilation, if they are not opening the windows, doing the daily detox, if they are not using the tumble dryer and drying clothes in the home, then they are bringing those problems upon themselves. So it's both. It's absolutely landlord and lifestyle, but it's about teaming up. And I think that's the big problem that we've got in this country, and it's media fueled. And that is that there's the big baddies are the energy suppliers right now, energy suppliers and landlords. And that's because people, refer to landlords as these big profiteering giants. And that's absolute nonsense. A lot of these landlords, they've got mortgages still on the properties. And they're going through lots of churn because people aren't looking after their home. So we all need to just team up together and all look after each other rather than this blame culture of, those big fat cat landlords not looking after their tenants. Once we can smooth that over, I think we can get into a better place.
I suppose the bad narrative comes when we've got deaths of infants, and there was another one, and I have to sort of give it some time before I can throw my bit in there about it. But there's been another one recently. But when you've got kids dying because, and this was housing associations not doing anything. But your talk about the sprays, and when our landlord, we had a leak that they've yet to determine where it came from, but lots of mold appearing on the ground floor in all the communal corridors and in cupboards. And they came round with a guy who had a van full of this toxic spray and sponges, and he just sort of sprayed and wiped. But you're saying that's a problem.
Yeah, that's a massive problem. So the way that mold works, this little science lesson, and I'm still learning all of this. So forgive me if I've got this, not quite right, but I think I've got it right. So the way that mold works is you have the actual physical mold, which is on the wall. And that's the visible mold. So let's say, for example, this is condensation caused mold. So this will be maybe around a window or in corners. So that's how you can kind of tell the difference between condensation and other types of mold. So this condensation mold is there, and it's got this, let's say, black kind of, the spots around it. Now that is kind of the gun, I suppose. So that's how we need to think about it. So that's the gun, that's the weapon. Then the way that mold works is it releases spores. So those spores are the bullets. So those, because mold is opportunistic, so it's not supposed to be inside, it's outside, it's ubiquitous, it's everywhere. There are genus and species coming, there's millions and trillions. But when it does come into our house and it finds that wet, well, not wet, but moist place to land, it starts to grow. And so it colonizes, it then will respond to what's happening around it. So if you just walk past that mold on the wall, it will pick up on that draft and it will respond by releasing spores, because it will be, oh, we're under attack, we're going to release spores. So that's the first thing it will do. And then, so that's your gun, you've got your bullets. And then from those spores, you've then got this basically chemical warfare. And it acts like a gas, but they're secondary metabolites that come off the spores. One spore can give off.
Sorry, we lost you there. Um,
Oh,
yeah, you froze.
so so you've got mold in the corridor. We're not quite sure why it's there, but it's there. So you've got that visual reminder that it's there, and it's opportunistic. So it's going to grow as much as it can until you do something about it. But every time you walk past that mold on the wall, it will pick up on the fact that it's under attack, because something's happening. That airflow is creating then these mold spores to be released, because it's trying to colonize and grow even more. So so you've got the mold on the wall that is the gun, then you've got the spores, which are like the bullets, and then from those spores, they then produce a type of, it's like a chemical, it's called a secondary metabolite, and that is mycotoxin. So the spores then give off these trillions of mycotoxins, and that is what can pass the blood-brain barrier. So that's where people get the inflammatory mold response rather than just the allergic mold response. So when somebody comes into your home and they say, you've got a mold problem, I can get rid of that for you. The worst thing they can do, first of all, is spray it, because by spraying it, what's going to happen is that mold's going to fight back straight away by releasing spores and releasing mycotoxins, which are then going to cover the whole room and other rooms and you and everything in all of this contamination. So spraying mold is a big no-no. So what would need to happen is the person that is going in to deal with the mold would need to be fully hazmat suit, so that they are head to toe in protective clothing. If possible, have breathing apparatus, but if not, have a very good face filter, and then face mask with a filter. And then they would need to do it's a type of basically like an air setup where they have negative pressure. So they're pulling out all of the bad stuff while they're doing remediation. And then you cannot kill mold. So what you see from mold, that's just on the surface. The rest of it is grown into that material. You need to cut it out. So you can't, so all of these sprays that you see and all of the crap that is used by housing associations, councils, landlords, mold remediation companies who say they are mold remediation companies, but they're not. They come in and do dry fogging and make people really sick. It's nonsense. So if you go into Sainsbury's and you walk down the aisle for cleaning products, you can find probably 5 sprays that call them, describe themselves as mold killers or mold spray. And every single one of them have sodium hypochlorite in them, and that is bleach. And bleach feeds mold. Mold loves bleach because it basically gives it everything it needs to continue to grow. So what happens is so in your case where you've got that mold because of it sounds like a leak in the communal area, is that the person will go in and they'll do a poor remediation job, and then you're going to be left with all of the after effects. So that will be fighting back. You've essentially got chemical warfare then, and that will be fighting back. It will be fighting with, if let's say, for example, you walk past and you've got an aftershave on, that will trigger a response from it. Any chemical will continue to trigger responses from it. So that's why you have to cut it out and you have to remediate safely.
And when you say cut it out, are you talking about cutting out a section of the wall?
Yeah. Yes, the only way. We had in our new house, so we've moved since we had the illness. In our new house, we've got a downstairs loo, and that backs onto the under the stairs, the cupboard under the stairs. And I got a smell of that musty, horrible smell. And my dad's a builder, and I said to him, Dad, could you just have a look to see what you can see in there? Because I didn't want to go in there for obvious reasons. So he popped his head in. He said, yes, Lisa, there's mold all over the backboard where the toilet, the tiny little nut on the toilet had been leaking. And it was a slow leak. And then the backboard had basically just been saturated slowly. So it was probably been happening for years. But we hadn't noticed it because we'd recently moved in. And he said, let's get some advice. So I spoke to lots of I'm working with like professors of mycology and black mold, PhD experts, everyone that knows everything there is to know about mold. So I'm asking them all, what should I do? And it was quite scary. The fact that lots of them said, I don't know. Some of them said to do things that would have made it worse. But by the time I got to the bottom of it, the best advice is remove it. Because actually, by leaving it there, you are risking your health, and that's just not worth it.
I have had some scary conversations on these podcasts, but I think this one is probably the most scary. Okay, look, so you've got a young family out there, and you haven't picked up on this smell. What effects in your kids should you be looking out for that make you go, actually? And when you get to the doctor, what are the things that you should be saying so the doctor doesn't misdiagnose you?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go back to that iceberg. So right at the top, so if your child is having an allergic response, then they might be coughing and sneezing, chest infections, regular chest infections that just don't feel like they're going away with antibiotics, a change in their voice, and then anything else like itching, hives. That would be the allergic response to what's happening in the air around you. When you go to the GP, take photos with you of your environment. If you can afford it, because it's all private, you can't get anything on the NHS or council or anything, but do air testing as well, because at least then you're going to the GP with the evidence of what's happening in your environment. So that's the allergic part. Now, the NHS recognises that bit. So they have a good procedure to care for your children. Sadly, it gets to that point, and that's kind of like if you look at Big Pharma, they just basically then just say, here's some inhalers. But what I want to get to is how do we stop this happening in the first place so that you're not taking your child to the GP? How do we basically say, we don't want your inhalers, Big Pharma. We want to know that we're in safe air from before the baby's born, because the baby can be impacted by mold in the womb. And there's loads of evidence of that. So that's the allergic response, but then the inflammatory response is huge for kids. So I am working with, I've got the Mums Versus Mould, which is 1,800 families with issues. But then I've got a WhatsApp group who are a team of amazing women who have kids who are impacted by mold. And the sorts of things that you need to look out for are mood changes. So, and obviously, all kids can have mood changes, but these are where your kid basically turns into a devil. There was somebody on one of the morning television programs talking about how mold made their child turn into a devil child overnight. And it's true, because what it's doing is it's causing inflammation of the brain, and they're not acting the way that they should. So that's one thing to look out for. So kind of sudden changes in behaviour. Other things are there's something called, I'm going to get this wrong because I always do, but it's called PANS and PANDAS. So this is pediatric acute neurological disorder. I think that's the kind of research it, but it's that sort of, so it's PANS and PANDAS. And this is all about the neurological side of environmental illness. So what happens is your child might start bedwetting or having nightmares. So I've got some mums who have got 13-year-old children who started bedwetting all of a sudden, age 11, just out of nowhere. And it was because of the environment that they were living in. And then other things like basically at school as well, there's lots of water damage in schools. So even if you haven't got the environmental problem in your own home, it might be something that's happening at school. So if these things persist and you're thinking there's something not right, then inquire. So go to the school and ask, can I see the classrooms that he's spending his time in, or that she's spending her time in, because there's something that's not quite right. We just can't underestimate the power of the air around us.
Do you think over the years so much of this has been misdiagnosed?
Yeah. 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 And I can't help but think it's Big Pharma that is kind of letting it happen, because, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but everything comes back to, why aren't we preventing this? If we can prevent it. Mold should not grow in our homes. Homes are being built to become moldy, and no one's doing anything about that. And the people that benefit from that are who? People that need to build new homes. So the home builders themselves, because they've got to build more and more homes because of the demise of those they've already built. And I've got loads of examples of brand new builds which are covered in mold. And the home builders are ignoring me. They start to listen and they come to me for advice, and then all of a sudden it's kind of that brick wall. And then who are the other people that benefit from people becoming ill because of the indoor environment? It's pharmaceutical companies. And that's the saddest thing. So I know lots of people who have got all of the environmental evidence that they are in a sick building. So they've done all the air testing themselves out of their own pocket. They've then got the private urine tests to show that they've got mycotoxin toxicity throughout their body. So they've got, my building's causing it. Here's the evidence of it's happening to me. They've taken both of those evidence then along to a neurologist and said, look, this is not functional neurological disorder. This is environmental impact. Please don't diagnose me with functional neurological disorder. And they've said, no, functional neurological disorder, go off and take some go off and take some antidepressants.
My God, it's so difficult to say, oh, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, isn't it? Because people then can dismiss you as being Delally and away with fairies. But as I've found it, there's so much of it that just simply doesn't stack up unless, we're running out of time, Lisa. I think we need to revisit this conversation. Can you provide me all the links and I'll put them in the comment section below, and people can join your group. But for now, Lisa, by God, thank you very much indeed for joining me on what has been possibly the most terrifying podcast yet.
Sorry.
It's not your fault. Keep
Thank
up
you
the
for
great
having
work.
me.